Welcome to the JCPS MTSS training on the modes of instruction and student practice toolkit with a focus on the use of instructional grouping. I'm Amy Downs, MTSS engagement resource teacher with Elementary Zone 2.
Hi, I'm April Bimker, MTSS engagement resource teacher with the AIS zone working with middle and high schools.
Please take a moment and type the case-sensitive bit.ly into your web browser. This will allow you access to all the links for the resources and activities offered throughout the presentation. Here you will see the 6 components that make up the MTSS department or multi-tiered systems of support. MTSS focuses on overall school improvement by aligning resources and support for both teachers and students. We provide multiple levels of support for learners that address academic, social, emotional, and behavioral needs and produce professional development that is aligned with schools and the district as a whole. This concept map shows the departments within MTSS. MTSS Academics is directed by Donna Lawson, supports schools by ensuring teachers are providing all students with academic supports, with a focus on Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and supports. MTSS Behavior Department, which is directed by Sandra Hensel, supports schools in implementing school-wide behavior systems and frameworks, including Positive Behavior Interventions and Supports, or PBIS, and the Behavior Support Systems Model, which is an alignment of PBIS and restorative practices. Our department is MTSS Engagement. It's directed by Dr. Naomi Brahim. The goal of the MTSS Engagement Department is to increase student achievement by equipping teachers with high-yield pedagogical practices to maximize student engagement. 6 MTSS toolkits were created to provide resources for Tier 1 instructional practices to increase student engagement, reduce student behaviors, and to decrease disproportionality. Here are our 6 MTSS toolkits. By clicking the toolkit image, you will have access to the MTSS department webpage and each of our toolkits. The Modes of Instruction and Modes of Student Practice Toolkit is focused on the manner in which teachers provide the components of instructions. It is divided into 2 sections that include the modes with which teachers deliver instructions to students during the body of a lesson, and also the modes with which teachers facilitate student practice in authentic ways. To be clear, teacher modes of instructions must occur prior to practice, as the intent is the teacher sets the student up for success with more authentic and independent activities. The high-yield practices in this toolkit will equip teachers with the tools they need to be well-versed and fluent in both of these areas so that their students achieve at high levels. Today, we're going to focus on one area of instructional organization, and that's instructional grouping. In today's training, we will explore various instructional grouping techniques to use in order to increase student engagement and understanding so that you can determine which ones will work best with your students. When looking at the levels of student engagement, we often have students who fall in the ritual compliance or strategic compliance levels. They pay attention some or most of the time, but they tend to not be fully committed to or engaged in the lesson. Through the use of the high-yield instructional practices, like the ones included in the MTSS toolkits, and strategically grouping your students in ways that we will discuss in this training, you can get students to the highest level of engagement. So, our primary focus for today is to explore this question. How do we organize our instruction using intentional grouping to increase student engagement and understanding? Let's look at why instructional grouping is used. There are many great reasons, some of which are listed on this slide, such as to ensure that all students learn, to increase student engagement in learning, to teach students how to work with others, to facilitate social interaction among students, to motivate students, to improve students' self-concepts and attitudes towards self and school, and to teach students how to learn in a variety of ways. Instructional grouping gives learners more opportunities to speak and practice what they've learned. It will help to change the pace of the lesson, and it is a great way to add energy to your classroom, especially when the topics are considered heavier or more difficult. With prior planning and preparation, you can get so much out of your instruction when using instructional grouping. On our next slide, we are going to watch a video that's going to explain a few different ways to group students.
Hello and welcome to Teachings in Education. I am your narrator, Frank Avella. Here we are going to explore classroom settings for small groups, individual teaching, whole classroom, and partnered learning. Each case will be explored in terms of different teaching strategies. So we're going to dive right in and look at teaching to whole classroom settings. Here, students frequently are not paying attention, so asking questions to the entire classroom is a great way to increase engagement. Teachers should ask open questions that lead to classroom discussions. When teaching to the entire classroom, things can get a little bit rowdy. Teachers must establish speaking rules and codes of conduct so that students are not talking over one another. Incorporate visuals into the lesson and keep the lecture to a minimum. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and we don't want to bore our students to death by lecturing for the entire period. Lesson planning should include fun activities such as brainstorming, classroom games, movies, demonstrations, and many more. Again, engagement is very important. The next section is teaching to small groups, which offers a number of benefits to students. Teachers have the ability to tailor lessons to specific needs of students. There can be one group for students that have difficulty with equations and another group of students that have difficulty with factoring. Students will be able to share ideas with one another, and the more shy students will be more willing and open to have discussions as opposed to speaking up in large groups. Teachers always have the option of using homogeneous groups, which are the same level, or mixed heterogeneous groups, different levels. Mixed level grouping allows for different perspectives and acceptance of ideas. Now we're going to look at partners or peer tutors. If using the peer tutoring model, teachers must first train the students to be peer tutors. This includes teaching them how to interact with their fellow students in a positive way. With peer tutors, you can have targeted goals and set guidelines. Have the tutor work with their peers until they're able to divide fractions with 90% accuracy. Partnering students together will help shy children open up a little bit more. Those students often remain quiet during whole class instruction. Many times, long-lasting friendships develop. One warning, teachers need to be careful to avoid the appearance of peer tutors as being seen as smarter than other students. It can be a delicate situation at times, and teachers need to be vigilant. And the last section is teaching individually to students in a one-on-one setting. An example would be having extra help. Teachers must have set time schedules to work individually with their students. Collaborate with the students to find out the best day and time. Teachers usually only work individually with students when a particular student needs extra assistance. Many times certain concepts just aren't getting through in the classroom, and one-on-one time is all that is needed. It's best to have a quiet place for individual work. During class, finding time can be difficult, as students will always have questions to ask or will require the teacher's attention in some manner. And the last strategy is to work at a comfortable pace for the student. Don't try to rush the student to learn the material, but show patience during this time. Right now, I want to say thank you for your time. Please check the description for resources. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel.
Here you will see several types of instructional grouping. some of which were mentioned in the video that we just watched. In the next few slides, April will show you some more details about each of these. While we will not go into depth on each type, please remember that you do have access to these materials by using the bit.ly after this training.
This chart provides a description of each type of grouping, as well as when it might be beneficial to use each type. For example, consider using same ability grouping for guided reading groups, intervention groups, and focus groups, whereas it might be best to use mixed ability groups for project-based tasks when using the jigsaw strategy or for peer instruction. This chart continues with more types of grouping, including student choice, which is good to use when you want students to take the lead, flexible grouping, which involves using a combination of grouping types depending on where you are in the lesson and what your students' needs are. The last one listed, pairs or partners, which you did mention in the video, can be used at any time and takes the least amount of prior planning. It can and should be used often. It is extremely beneficial because it provides a way for all students, including your reluctant participants, as he mentioned in the video, to engage with the content in a non-threatening way, and it allows you the chance to circulate and assess student understanding. One-on-one is for individual conferencing for intensive instruction or feedback. And individual grouping is used for students to work independently on self-selected reading or leveled skills practice, as he mentioned in the video. As you can see, there are many different ways to group your students, and we encourage you to use a variety. As mentioned earlier, regardless of which types of grouping you use, prior planning and preparation will help to ensure success. On this next slide, we will cover more tips to consider when grouping students. Taking proactive steps to manage groups enhances engagement while curbing the chaos. One tip is to be clear and specific about the task. If possible, limit initial verbal explanations to a general overview of the task and process, and then provide crystal clear, detailed, electronic or paper-based directions to each student in the group. Anticipate potential questions and areas of confusion by using a checklist format, providing visuals, or audio or video recording instructions for groups. Another tip is if you are assigning groups specific work to submit, products should require all group members' participation or contributions. There are many possibilities, such as a graffiti-like poster in the middle of the table on which everyone records ideas, or a graphic organizer that every student completes. Third, show, don't just tell, students the basic mechanics that are critical to success in your classroom. Maybe it's how to move between stations, the process for using a discussion strategy, or how to talk during a think, pair, share. Devote the first few weeks of class to conducting dry runs with students moving from place to place, students retrieving and returning materials, students using technology appropriately, and etc. Use volunteers to act out example and non-example conversations with elbow partners. Post or provide sentence frames as scaffolds for group dialogue. This kind of upfront investment will pay off when students are able to move, transition, and converse efficiently. Another tip is to make students partners, if not primary agents, in keeping tabs on their progress, the time, and the noise level. Track time with an online digital stopwatch or another easy-to-see timer, and make sure to give students less time than you think they need in order to build a sense of urgency. Check in when time is running low to see if groups require more time. If some groups finish before others, have a next step question or task ready for students to tackle. And lastly, full class community building activities are critical. But smaller, deliberately planted group level bonding moments also reap rich rewards in helping groups gel, release tension, and exercise courtesy. This might involve using an opening prompt like, before you start, share your favorite ice cream flavors. Consider displaying fun anchor questions for students to discuss once they are finished. Anchor questions keep students from drifting into uncharted work or conversations, while providing a structure that lets students stretch beyond the content to discover connections with one another. Culturally responsive teachers realize not only the importance of academic achievement, but also that of maintaining cultural identity and heritage. Culturally responsive teachers build a classroom community through cooperative learning, differentiated instruction, peer teaching, and reciprocal teaching. The grouping strategies we covered in this training will support this type of classroom community. Students with exceptional needs must practice skills with a high rate of success. Scaffolded supports are used to assist students who may not be able to complete a given skill independently. Opportunities for frequent practice are needed for students with exceptional needs to become fluent in a given skill. Many of the grouping techniques we covered, including same ability grouping, flexible grouping, and one-on-one, promote opportunities for students to receive additional supports and practice what they need for success. Many of the grouping approaches we've shared in this training would be conducive to a project-based learning model. One of the foundational components for PBL is developing 21st century skills in students, which include collaboration, communication, and social skills. Utilizing a variety of grouping techniques like the ones we've covered in this training will help you develop in your students these skills during project-based learning. What's next? We've provided you with a tool you can use with your PLC to help you when planning for how to best use instructional grouping in your classroom to keep students engaged and accelerate learning. You can access the planning tool by clicking on the underlined words on this slide. Thank you for participating in this training on instructional grouping. For more information on our toolkits or other high-yield instructional practices, please visit our website. Have a great day.